I'm Dr. Deepak Chopra, and this is my invitation to atheists to be more skeptical.
Challenge accepted, Deepak. Challenge accepted. Hi, I'm Jay.
And I'm R.
In this video, we're going to do a response to Deepak Chopra on why he thinks atheists and some skeptics aren't skeptical enough. Let's get started.
And I'll explain why. Because most skeptics, as they call themselves these days, particularly the new atheists and militant atheists, they base their ideas about reality on something called naive realism. Naive realism simply means that our perceptual experiences give us a clue to what reality is, or give us direct access to what reality is.
Well, call me a naive realist, I guess. If naive realism is accepting that human perception can give us insight into reality, then I don't see the problem with it. Sure, our senses only give us a limited perception of reality, but that doesn't mean they provide no insight. It would only be naive to assume that our sensory perception of the world is all there is to reality, which is pretty easy to prove otherwise given we can detect things using technology which we otherwise would have no perception of.
The fact is, what we experience as empirical evidence is actually a mode of observation in a specific species, the human species in this case, through a human brain. This is an assumption on our part that the human brain actually has the capacity to deliver to us what reality is.
Okay, now I know where this is going. You're going to make claims about absolute certainty, aren't you? I guess we should have expected as much. Don't act like you're the first person to figure out that humans are fallible when it comes to perceiving reality. That's the whole reason science exists, so we can examine our reality methodically instead of just relying on our own interpretation of empirical information. It's important to clarify no one is claiming the human perception of reality is perfect.
The human brain receives electrical information really from the five senses: sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And by the time information reaches the brain, it has been abstracted at least 5 times. If you want to know more about this, you should basically Google or Wikipedia naive realism.
Okay, so we did that, and thankfully Wikipedia is better at explaining things than you. So as it turns out, naive realism is the philosophy that our senses provide all the relevant information for us to make objective assertions about reality, free from any biases or misinterpretations by the observer. Seriously, Deepak, how many skeptics do you think this applies to? I've yet to meet a person who understands the meaning of the word skepticism and thinks everything they see and hear is objectively true. Up your standards on who you call a skeptic, please.
Which simply means that our sensory experience and the extensions of our sensory experience, whether it's through Hubble telescope or the James Watson telescope, or through the Hadron Collider, or through any technology, is still an extension of our sensory experience. And that experience is ultimately in the form of electrical information to the brain. The brain has a limited capacity, and that is what we call reality.
Do you have any other methods for defining reality? I'm not going to say our understanding of reality is perfect, or even that empirical evidence is objectively the best measure of reality, but you just outlined how the human mind is flawed in its perceptions of reality. So unless you're about to transcend your own existence and become an omnipotent ball of energy, free of the constraints of your own biology, then I don't see how you're going to make assertions beyond empirical evidence. If you really want to extend your skepticism beyond the limitations of the human brain you just mentioned, then I expect you to sit quietly in the corner, not moving or speaking, because you can't be sure anything your brain does or experiences is real.
So, if you understand that your sensory experience or even empirical evidence is not reality in the true sense, but a particular map of reality, then you will not be a naive realist.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I understand that. Actually, I'm going to go on a limb here and say most skeptically minded people also understand that. So what's your alternative? Because understanding that doesn't change reality. The reality is that we have no choice but to process information through our brains. Hence science, hence retestability, hence the peer review system. I really would like to hear how you think we are going to transcend the limitations of the human brain. Because without transferring human consciousness into some sort of supercomputer, I'm all out of ideas.
It's interesting that people who are naive realists call themselves skeptics. So I'm saying to the skeptics, you're not skeptical enough. You believe in what you see, when in fact what you see is the expression of something that is unmanifest and invisible.
I honestly thought you would start with the woo terminology a lot sooner. It must be my naive realism that made me think that. Frankly, I'm a little insulted you think skeptics just believe in what they see. In fact, that's almost in direct contradiction to the definition of skepticism. A skeptic reserves opinion until evidence is presented in favor of a particular conclusion, and I think you have just presented enough evidence for me to conclude that you're a moron. People have to navigate the world through their senses, and just because our senses only provide a limited perception of reality doesn't mean that what we do perceive is unmanifested or invisible. We have to play with the toys we have. The majority of the skeptical community do understand that human perception isn't perfect, but is the best thing we have for building a model of reality that we can interact with, and that's the key. Our model of reality yields consistent results. We can interact with it in such a way that we don't die, and are able to make advancements based off it. Using that alone, we can conclude that we are forming at least a somewhat accurate perception of our realities.
It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it the emptiness or the womb of all creation, or nothing, or the field of possibilities, or God, or cosmic consciousness, or the Akashic field, or the grid, or the matrix, or the quantum vacuum.
Naming it something different doesn't actually make it different. You would need to demonstrate why it has the properties you are ascribing to it.
But there's something invisible that's constantly giving rise to the visible universe. And this something invisible is not a thing, but actually a field that is giving rise to information, energy, and matter, and our biology, all the different observers that look at the universe that are species specific, all the modes of observation that are also species and culture specific, all the objects of observation which are space-time events in our own consciousness.
Okay, Deepak, now it's time you applied a little skepticism. What evidence do you have to suggest any of this? What reason is there to believe in something you can't sense or measure is real? You say people aren't skeptical enough when they believe in perceivable reality, but for some reason it's perfectly fine to believe in something you can't perceive at all. You can't suggest we increase skepticism when accepting things we can observe, and in the next sentence suggest we drastically reduce our standard of evidence to accept your unsubstantiated word salad. You have to see how stupid that is.
So, dear skeptics, be more skeptical. Don't be bamboozled by the appearance of the material world, because the material world, no one has proven that it exists.
What standard of evidence do you require to prove that the material world exists? Because everything we do is based on a standard premise that there is some form of material world. Our senses may not give a perfect picture of reality, but they allow us to assert at the very least that there is a physical world which we have to navigate through. You realize you have the burden of proof when it comes to making claims about physical reality, right? Our current model allows us to survive and function. In short, it works. For you to undermine that, you would need some serious evidence. And if we were permanently skeptical of our own reality to the point where we don't accept observable and repeatable evidence, you can't function in this reality. If you really believe that the material world has no place in reality, then nothing you do from eating food and breathing air to selling snake oil makes any sense. And if you're asserting human cognition isn't reliable enough, then you can't rely on the same faculties to interpret the non-physical world. So we just end up in a discussion of absolute certainty which takes us nowhere.
No one has ever proven that matter actually exists.
No, that's stupid. We can observe it consistently, and we can interact with it and yield results. You can whinge about not having absolute certainty in regards to reality all you want, but that doesn't give us reasonable doubt that physical matter exists. Bear in mind the term here, reasonable doubt. Your doubt is not reasonable.
Max Planck said mind is the matrix of all matter. And he also said you can't get behind consciousness. Schrödinger said, in truth, there is only one mind. So when we go beyond the appearance of molecules and matter, enter the subatomic cloud of particles, which are probability smears, and pierce that, we end up with a field of infinite possibilities, infinite correlation, infinite creativity, and where the power of intention of the cosmos really resides.
No, where we end up is nowhere. We can experiment, test, and make observations of this physical reality you claim doesn't exist, and these observations remain true regardless of who is observing them. That's how we can assert they are true. Everything you just spouted is conjecture which is untestable, unverifiable, and unsubstantiated, and worse than that, it's unproductive. When these assertions prove useful in moving humanity forward, I may change my mind, but so far all they serve to do is distract people from actual reality and give them hope for irrational beliefs. Honestly, a definition for skepticism should have preceded your ramblings, because I very much doubt we are talking about the same thing. Also, I just want to make clear the double standard here. You're essentially telling me to doubt my computer actually exists because my perception and cognition of it occurs within my brain, but then tell me to accept your cosmic consciousness and infinite possibilities, which you conjured up in your brain. You don't understand what skepticism is, Deepak.
If you were skeptical enough, you would see that you're not going far enough in your skepticism. You believe in the existence of the material world, which no one has proved. Right now, the number one question in science is what is the universe made of? And nobody's been able to answer that because 96% of the universe is dark energy and dark matter, which is invisible. Only 4% is atomic, of which 99.9% is interstellar dust. The visible universe is 0.01% of what exists out there. And that 0.01%, which includes hundreds of billions of galaxies and billions and billions and billions of stars and trillions of planets, is atomic, but even atoms are subatomic particles. And these subatomic particles are waves of probability, or probability smears, and in the end they come out of a field of infinite possibilities.
So, ignoring the fact you claim no one has proven that the physical world exists and then list numerous discoveries of that physical world, it isn't essential that we understand matter at its most basic form. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and everything you listed previously is pretty good evidence for a physical reality. Even if we don't understand it in its entirety, it doesn't mean we can't interact with it. Like we mentioned earlier, a skeptic reserves their opinion until the evidence is presented. So if you are more skeptical than the skeptics, where is your evidence that suggests any of the BS you are spouting? If there really are infinite possibilities, is one of them you actually presenting evidence?
So, my dear skeptic friends and pseudo-atheists and pseudo-skeptics, go a little more skeptical. I call you pseudo-skeptics because you don't go far enough.
Maybe we could be a little more skeptical, but you definitely need to be a lot more skeptical. It doesn't take much skepticism to realize you talk a lot of unsubstantiated crap. The point of skepticism is not accepting things on face value, and you said correctly, everything should be questioned. I think most skeptics would agree on that point. I think most skeptics would also agree there is far more reason to believe in the physical reality than the one you have conjured in your head about infinite possibilities and cosmic consciousness. You may call me a pseudo-skeptic, but only one of us is making very grandiose claims without any kind of evidence, and it isn't me. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for weekly videos, like this video, and share it around to help us raise the bar of public discourse.